Here to share with you, along with my friend Tom, about what we've done here at Bishop O'Dowd to help our students learn to connect with the earth, to have a relationship with the earth, to get to understand how the earth speaks through us, and that where we can listen, where we learn the science and we learn the spirit of the natural world, and we develop fierceness for the times we live in. I come to this, I'll just tell you a little bit about me and then I'm off the stage for a bit. I was born on Narragansett land at the edge of the Narragansett Bay and the deciduous forest to old parents as an only child. I spent all my time growing up in that forest alone. My mom didn't understand me at all. She came from poor, white, racist roots in Florida. She was so happy to have a nice house to live in, and that's what she wanted for me. So she kept losing me to nature. When I was 1, I would crawl out of the house and into the grass to talk to the bugs. When I got a little older, I had this great old pine tree that I would live underneath it in its roots and branches, and I really would disappear. Or I'd climb up it where she couldn't see me. And I learned those were my big teachers. Those trees, that soil, those bugs. And my teachers as I move forward in life have been nature and the people whose traditions are closest to the earth. When I was 17, I went to a Narragansett powwow, and people were standing in circle and praying to the earth in a way that sung to me as this is what we need now. And from that point on, I sought teachers who were close to their traditions in connection with the earth, and that brought me to be a supporter and a security supporter of various actions to protect Earth led by Native Americans. And that's my real teaching. That's my real education throughout my 20s, on the longest walk, and with the Chumash protecting the Western Gate, and then later Winnemucca here in California. And those are my real teachers. I also became a scientist. I have an MS in Wildland Resource Science from Cal, and it's amazing how those two teachings, those two body of education that I've had, completely integrate. But so much of my early education in science didn't recognize it at all. Now they do. And I became an activist and a filmmaker. And that's how I came here. My good friend Tom Tyler asked me to come to his Earth Science and AP Environmental Science class to show my films from Borneo and Papua New Guinea on deforestation and all of this. And I loved it. And then we went on nature hikes. I also was a naturalist. And that one thing led to another. And then Tom said, we need you. Come and teach. And so I did. And then the Living Lab was not far after that, because teaching has to be on the ground. Teaching about the earth has to be doing something to heal. You can't learn about the problems of these times with doing something with our hands and our bodies and community. And we started down at the Arrowhead Marsh, and we worked on the restoration of the marsh after it had been destroyed by Phil. And then the Living Lab came next. You're going to hear about that shortly. That's all from me right now.
Good morning. I'm Tom Tyler, and welcome. Kyle, when you referred to this is a spiritual ecology conference, I imagine when you got the invitation, it sounded appealing, but you weren't quite sure exactly what it would be about and what the full content of it would be, or where it could lead from here. So we appreciate the leap of faith you all took to be here today, to accept this as an invitation to come with an open heart and an open mind. And we are so delighted that it's happening here at the school. We've spent so much of our professional lives. It means a lot to us that you came here today. It's very nostalgic for me to be back here. As Annie mentioned, we taught together for many years. I was here as a science teacher from the late 70s to the mid 2000s. And I met Annie because our spouses worked together. And over dinner one night, we realized, after she had just come back from a trip to Papua New Guinea, and I heard about her travels and her environmental activism in the world, and she heard about my brand new advanced placement environmental science class. It was another marriage made in heaven for us to be found to have the same interests. And I have to also say that it was right at that time when I became a father for the first time. I had twins, a boy and a girl, Sage and Maya, who were crawling around under the dinner table while we were eating. And I knew that there was something calling in me that somehow stretched my sense of who I was beyond my own life and beyond my own interests, because I was looking at the world through their eyes and their future. So the story of how we began our programs here at O'Dowd is what we'd like to tell you today. And I think the best way to begin it is with a film. It's a short film. We helped to produce it. You'll also be able to hear in the film the voices of those students who have been part of our past and certainly part of our inspiration. And then afterwards, we'll fill in some of the more of the nitty-gritty details of what we do here, and hopefully they'll serve as some inspiration, perhaps as practical things that you can do in your own communities and in your own schools and in your own neighborhoods. So with that, we'll turn down the lights and we'll start the movie. And once we shift from this venue to the Center for Environmental Studies, it has been completed. And it is now the heart and soul of what we do here in terms of our environmental science programs and our spiritual ecology program too. In the next few minutes, I've been asked to kind of give a little bit of a overview of the story, kind of the story that happened kind of as the kind of backdrop to all that we have been doing here at O'Dowd. So this is the land we're talking about. This is the place that was a wasteland. This was the corner of the campus, 4.5 acres, that was neglected, abused, and a place for dumping garbage. There was even a body that was dumped there at one point. And it was essentially in a neighborhood that didn't find much value in that land, and the school, frankly, didn't either. So what we decided to do is that we needed to learn about our place here, we needed to learn about our story, and we needed, as those who embrace the genuine meaning of what ecology is all about, it's the study of our home, we needed to learn to care for our home. This is a 3 by 5 mile grid of an aerial shot of the O'Dowd campus. It shows that this picture was taken in 1946, and what it shows is that post-war boom was happening in the Bay Area. Buildings were going up everywhere, and the area in the kind of bottom right-hand corner is the area that became O'Dowd. There's another area that became the Oakland Naval Hospital right across the street, and the Oakland Zoo right across the street from that. This is what O'Dowd used to be. Talk about devastation. This was a rock quarry. The hill that we are on right now used to be, due to tectonic forces and the fact that Hayward Fault's right across the street, this strange little uplift of really hard rock that was considered very valuable in terms of building after the war. So our campus was actually formerly a rock quarry for about 3 decades, and a lot of that rock ended up under the Oakland Airport, the Oakland Coliseum, downtown, and around Lake Merritt. This is what our campus looked like when it was first built. Behind us is a reservoir that's still there, although it's empty, called Seneca Reservoir. The campus, when it was christened in 1951, it was christened in 1951. Sorry about that. It looked pretty stark. It certainly, given that it was a rock quarry, it needed some greening. And so as we move to the next chapter, if you look at the aerial views of O'Dowd now, you can see that it certainly has greened a bit, and we'll take you to the greenest part of the campus shortly. Part of that we owe to the legacy of these people. The 2 people in the foreground are students, but behind them are graduates of the very first graduating class of 1956 that spent all 4 years here at O'Dowd. We invited them back to the campus because they planted almost all the trees you see on that hillside there. They didn't necessarily do it willfully. It was what we call detention and detention crews. Detention crews were told that they were going to green the campus, and so somewhat begrudgingly they went out into the hills behind us and planted trees and cared for them. And when they came back on their 60th reunion, they said, "I know that tree. I planted that because I got caught smoking behind the gym." They actually had a birding club back then, but they said there were very few birds to see because we had no greenery nearby. So we still honor them with a plaque down in the Living Lab. You'll see it today if you take a tour with us. Really, for us, what kind of sparked the whole kind of environmental movement was an event some of us remember back in 1969. In the beginning of 1969, there was a huge oil spill off the Santa Barbara coast. Many of us who were here at that time were part of the cleanup efforts. Also later that year, of course, 50 years ago, it's hard to imagine, but 50 years ago, these first images of the Earth from space saw our planet whole, and I think even the term ecology felt like it had a certain resonance when we realized this is our little home in space here. It's perhaps no coincidence. Again, the Bay Area is a magical place. In 1970, the first Earth Day happened. It was sponsored by people in San Francisco. We flew the Earth flag based on that image from space. And there's Brad Goodhart, my mentor, the person who hired me. And here he is, fresh out of college, starts here in 1969, and decides he too is going to start an environmental science program. So he started the very first environmental studies program in the country for a high school, at the same time that UC Santa Barbara began the first collegiate course. 2000 was a big deal. You know, everybody's waiting for the new millennium. In our context here, these are students from that very first AP Environmental Science class. You can see Annie in the picture there in blue. And those were the students who were involved in a restoration project down at Arrowhead Marsh near the Oakland Coliseum. And they suggested that we do something a little closer to home. Annie had a few like-minded colleagues. They're pictured up in the top right-hand corner there. We also had a principal who came to us fresh from Boys Town in Nebraska, where he served as the summer camp chaplain, Father Don McLeod. And coincidental at that same time, David Brower, who was one of our heroes, local environmental hero from Berkeley. He led the Sierra Club, Friends of the Earth, Earth Island Institute. He died in November of that year. And at his memorial service, everyone was given a plant. They said, "You want to honor his legacy? Plant this somewhere and take care of it." And he used to exhort people at his meetings with the phrase that he got from Goethe, which went, "Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. For boldness has genius, power, and magic in it." We took that to heart, and a small group of us gathered around a little place out on the platform you're going to see shortly, and we called it the Living Lab. It also helped that the next year was the 50th anniversary of O'Dowd, and the students, with a little bit of help behind the scenes with faculty, convinced in this auditorium, I never forget this meeting, the only faculty meeting I've ever seen where whatever was proposed got unanimous support and a standing ovation. And that came because the students said, "You know what we want to do? We want to take this idea of a living lab and we want to restore that whole 4.5 acre corner over there on the campus." And so it began. There really wasn't much here. When you go out there and you see it now, you'll be surprised at how desolate it used to look then. Also a little shout out to our classroom. Andy and I shared the same classroom for the better part of 10 years. This is our room. That's the window we looked out at. The far distant view was the San Francisco skyline and the Oakland skyline at the forefront, beautiful in the bay. But to the right in front of us was this desolate wasteland that we called the Living Lab. We knew we had work to do, and again, those are my children on the left and on the right, so I felt particularly invested in this project. How do we begin? Practical things to do. You need to save the soil, or in this case, restore or make soil, because it was a rock quarry. So here are students laying out jute netting and putting out mulch and digging swales and planting trees and anything we could do just to get the campus green on that site. The next key element, of course, is you've got to have water. Water is absolutely essential. The students made it clear to us that what they really wanted was they wanted a pond. So the very first thing we did was we started to dig a pond. Now we knew this was a place on the campus where naturally water would accumulate. So we figured that we would work with the land and let that water express itself. The willow trees nearby were a clue that they were getting water somewhere, and so we put in the pond, and that became kind of the centerpiece of the Living Lab. We had to do some infrastructure. We had to build a few things. So students, especially our students who don't get a lot of work with tools and so on, were given opportunity to kind of build things, build sheds and put in water reservoirs and build stairs and make trails and greenhouses. And here they are wielding their tools very unsafely. We were posing that picture. I said, make it look like you're doing something. And then we realized that's probably the worst example of how to build a trail. 6 people simultaneously, flailing at the earth with pickaxes, not the best idea. And here's where I need to pause. I mean, Steve, I'm glad you mentioned it. There's a direct line from the moment when I met Anna to this moment today. She was one of my students, as Steve mentioned. As he mentioned, she was killed in an automobile accident on her way home from school during her senior year. To honor her, her tribe has been gathering on her birthday in December every year for the last 30 years. And for us, that made the Living Lab a sacred space, because we have Steve with his grandson, and we have honored her legacy and honored our commitment to heal the earth and heal our sorrow by continuing to plant these trees. And so here we are gathered around what we call Anna's Circle. You will have a chance to walk to it as well. There are 2 native hummingbirds, coincidentally, that we see all the time. One is an Anna's hummingbird, the other one's a Costa's hummingbird. So if you are out there today and you see a hummingbird, that's the spirit of Anna watching over us. And to this day, we offer a scholarship here every year for students at O'Dowd who continue her legacy and honor the earth by being stewards of the land, by taking care of the Living Lab. Coincidentally, in this picture, it may be hard to tell, but in the tall woman in white there standing next to me is Steve's granddaughter, who just started as a freshman this year at O'Dowd. Here's Annie outside. One of the things we stressed in our program was that we needed to dissolve the walls between our classroom and what goes on beside it. So that philosophy is what got us into doing all these things with students outdoors. Some of them close to home, some of them on the trail, some of them on hikes, some of them in the Living Lab. And then as an incentive to get them out there, each of our classes developed what the students called the BTC system, and we called it the Beyond the Classroom idea, that if you want to be in our classes, you need to do something beyond this classroom walls. We want what happens in here to be relevant to what goes on in the world, and we want you to bring the world back into this room. So we have a vigorous program where students get incentives to participate in the Living Lab and in our work days. And here we are in our work days, working on the compost bin, moving soil and mulch around, cleaning out the pond. And one of the nice things about a parent here at O'Dowd is if you want to look for a way to be with your teenage child, which can be challenging, I know this from my own experience, have them go with you to a Living Lab workday. Because there you are doing something that you can both enjoy, and you're not necessarily on top of each other, and you're probably still hanging out with your peer group, but at the end of the day you can look back and say, look what we did together. And then, again, students insisted we should grow food. And so food became an important part of the Living Lab. Well, you see chickens there. We have an orchard that we'll walk you through. We have a kitchen now. Some of our food goes to the school cafeteria. We often make soup in the cafeteria for lunch. We have a pizza oven, and we compost the waste, and oftentimes the food that is produced here goes to the kitchen, and then goes to the students, and the students' waste comes back to the compost bin, and that, of course, becomes soil that makes the next batch of food that goes back to them again. And we celebrate. You got to make it fun. So every year we have a harvest festival, and here you can see some pictures from us. The band comes and plays. The jazz band plays in the heart of the Living Lab. People who have interest in the community. This guy's a chicken keeper. Here's a beekeeper with his kid. We had a pumpkin contest. This is a lady that lives across the street from us who loves to make jams. She comes and sells Lynn's jams and jellies. And here we are having fun during one of our annual celebrations. A key element here is that philosophically, we embrace this idea of kinship with creation. Kinship with creation is part of our charism. It's the founding core principle of who we are as a student community and as a community at large. And here are pictures of us enjoying those moments with our students. Another key element is joy. I mean, high school kids have an incredible capacity for joy. And so here we are enjoying ourselves while celebrating our kinship with creation. And what you'll see today is a vision. I need to honor this gentleman. Steve Phelps was the president of O'Dowd. For the better part of 13 years, he died suddenly a year ago at Christmas after complications from heart surgery. If it hadn't been for him, much of what you're going to see when you leave this room and go across the way probably wouldn't have happened, because he believed in O'Dowd being a torchbearer for the environmental movement, a place where students could learn and then have the skills to make a difference in the world. When we had the idea of creating a building project, we had our students sleep on the site. We had them work with the architects to come up with some ideas. We did a design charrette. We met in our classrooms, explained to them the principles of environmental design, and they worked with other stakeholders, including parents, teachers, members of the community, and they came up with the design for what eventually became the Center for Environmental Studies. This is the crowning glory I was talking about, but really it's not a crowning glory. It's just the next step in a constant evolution of things that we want to do here. I loved hearing that Michael is going to be doing social justice and kinship as one role together. We have in our audience today, we have Andrew Ugoyan, who was actually our sustainability director. One of the keys to our success was that we were able to institutionalize this process and make it part of the school's hierarchy in terms of the power structure, in terms of authority, so that if there's a as kids move through the school, there's still something left here structurally in the school that's going to keep these programs alive. And with that, I'll just remind you that we're really all about education here. So we now have a program that's called the Certificate Program. These are students who are in, actually every single freshman that starts here at O'Dowd spends their first full year in the Center for Environmental Studies. It's a course called Science and the Environment. And as of next year, those freshmen will also be taking a service learning project that will dovetail nicely with this program. We also have programs where we do ecological restoration certificates, edible gardening, habitat restoration work. And here are students coming here for our summer camps. Annie has worked with them oftentimes. And sometimes we go out to schools themselves. There are schools down the street that we bring our plants to them. They grow them in our greenhouse and we bring them down and we plant them in their gardens. So there's a sense of urgency that we have about this. I mean, we love the students and we love our work, but there's a part of it that's, like you said, own the grief, own the sadness, own the pain, but keep the hope. And because we keep thinking about these children, and we keep thinking about our students, and we want them to feel connected, and we want them to feel like they hold the earth in their hands in the future, but we also want them to know that they're not doing it alone. One of the nice things about a conference like this is it's so multi-generational. It's like the elders are saying to the young people, we hold hands with you across our sense of time, and we are committed to be with you in the journey ahead. So here's a salute from the O'Dowd students, and here they are enjoying the fruits of their labor. And the quote at the end says, "We do not inherit the land from our ancestors," although I would say actually, we do inherit the land from our ancestors, and we borrow it from our children. Thanks so much for being here.
So it's a story that began with one little seed. And that little seed was in our classroom. One student looked out the window and said, "You know, that land out there looks terrible. We could do something about that." And at the time, it was covered with barbed wire. with razor wire on top. We had no access. And so those kids, and Tom and I, talked the principal into cutting a gate into it. And out we went. And we did what she said. And it became this whole project that you just saw. And who inspired us? Joanna Macy inspired us a lot. It's her teachings that are manifest living in this ground. Every kid learns that we have to open our hearts. We have to feel what's going on. We have to hold ourselves in community. And through that joyful community and feeling our sorrow together, we can change the world. We can heal the damage that's being done and has been done. We can do it. And our students are learning to do it every workday, after school, in our classes. And they're doing it in this piece of land, which I'm so excited that you're going to get to see soon. That's all for now.